Time. Brian, you may begin.
Thank you, Tony. Hello, exporters, and welcome to Export Week 2025. My name is Brian Beams, and I am the team leader for the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Services Global Financial Services Industry Team. On behalf of the Export Week team and federal partners from the SBA, SBDC, and XM, we welcome all of you to the first of three-part series of a trade finance series titled Export Business Planning and International Market Identification, Tips and Best Practices. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded. Participants are currently on listen mode. We will offer a question and answer portion at the end of the session. If you have questions, you can write them into the chat feature at any time. We will be sharing today's slide deck and potentially a resource to all registered participants of this trade finance series. We ask that you kindly refrain from recording or transcribing this meeting or using any apps, bots, or services to do the same. We reserve the right to disconnect any participants who may be recording or transcribing the call. Lastly, the views and opinions expressed in today's presentation may not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government. Next slide. So everybody who's not familiar with the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, we are the trade and investment arm of the federal government. We have been supporting the U.S. export community for over 40 years. This slide identifies some, not all, of our service-based, fee-based and service-based offerings to support U.S. exporters around the world into many markets. Next slide. This is where you'll get a quick snapshot of our presence. Folks, we have about 100 offices domestically, and of course a headquarters in DC. And then also we have offices, about 100 of them, in over 80 countries around the world. For more information about the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, please visit trade.gov. That's trade.gov. But now let's get to the moment we're all here for. I'll pass it over to Mr. Joe Raycraft with the Small Business Administration Office.
Hey, good morning, and thank you, Brian, and thanks to the Commerce Department for hosting us today. My name is Joe Raycraft. I work as Export Finance Manager for SBA's Office of Manufacturing and Trade. I'm based in Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm responsible for the New England region. There are 14 other export finance managers like me located in major metro areas around the country, and I did include a list for your reference at the end of the slide deck if you wanted to reach out to any of the export finance managers in your region. So for Export Week, we're really proud to be working together with the U.S. Commerce Department, the SBA, the Small Business Development Centers, the Export-Import Bank of the U.S., and other industry professionals for this three-part trade finance webinar series focusing on how small businesses can increase their international sales using a variety of trade tools and exporter resources. You'll learn best tips and best practices from experts in their field about how to successfully launch and expand your business globally. You can see on the screen, this is part one. Today is Export Business Planning and International Market Identification. And we're going to kick off Export Week with Denise Whitford, who's a business advisor with the Connecticut Small Business Development Center. And she'll present today's webinar. We're really lucky to have Denise here in Connecticut. She's an experienced business advisor, a former banker, and don't worry, there's lots of other Denises around the country. She's based here in Connecticut. I know this is a national webinar, so lots of folks from outside of New England. Denise will have the contact information of how to, find an advisor in your area. So today you're going to learn about how to prepare an international business plan, the importance of formulating a realistic plan, and why a good relationship with a knowledgeable lender is critical when you're selling overseas. You'll also learn some tips on how to identify best international markets for your products and or services using available digital tools. Also joined by Richard Foy, from the Export-Import Bank. He and I will serve as quasi-moderators and will be respectfully interrupting Denise once in a while with a few questions during her presentation. And I did put in the chat a link to Export Week. And if you're interested in the next two trade financing webinars, tomorrow is on experts with lots of tips and best practices on what your business needs to know about export credit insurance, payment terms, letters of credit, and foreign exchange. And on Wednesday, our final webinar, you'll learn what your business needs to know about conducting proper due diligence on international partners. And that discussion will be followed by what you need to know about export working capital financing. So with that, I just want to turn to Denise and Richard and ask each of you to do a brief kind of self-introduction.
All right, Richard, I'll go first if you want. I'm Denise Whitford. I'm a business advisor and a certified global business professional with the Connecticut Small Business Development Center. As Joe indicated, my background is in banking and economic development. I'm a generalist at the SBDC, but I really focus on helping new to export entrepreneurs break into new markets and successfully export. And from time to time, I get folks that are in that intermediate reactive exporter. They have people across the world that have found them, and we want to help them logically and intelligently get into those markets. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks so much. Rich, it's all you.
My name is Richard Hoy. I'm the regional director for the Northeast region of Ex-Im Bank. Ex-Im Bank is the official export credit agency of the United States with a focus on growing jobs by supporting U.S. exports. We have some key programs that are designed to reduce the financial risks associated with exporting, both to benefit lenders that are participating in this space, as well as exporters directly. And we'll get into those maybe somewhat through this conversation, but certainly over the next 2 days in the sessions that Joe outlined.
Perfect. Thank you, Rich. And these slide decks will be shared, so really no need to take notes. And also you can see the contact information is on this beginning slide. Plus we've got other contact info at the end. So again, it's really for your benefit to have our contact information. If you have a question later on after the presentation, you can, always don't hesitate to reach out to Denise, Rich, or I with any questions, and we can always, connect you with the resource that's most appropriate to your need. So with that, Denise, I'm going to kick it over to you on our International Business Planning webinar.
Great. Thank you so much. One little brief thing, I don't know how many people are truly familiar with the SBDCs. We do have them in every state across the country. Just a brief overview is we are part of a cooperative agreement from the SBA who collaborates with each of your states, and we are usually embedded within the School of Business in a flagship university, or in some cases community colleges. So don't hesitate to ask the questions or connect with me. If you're in a different state, I'm happy to connect you with my colleagues in that state. If we could go to the next slide, please, Joe. A little overview of the items that I'm going to cover today, a brief outline, as Joe indicated, about planning and strategizing to break into new markets. So I'm going to cover that export readiness assessment and tell you how we get there, which is a series of industry and market research. We're going to explore how to get some of those options focused, and then that export plan of development, how people find you in a marketing and action strategy. And then the most important thing is, again, that export finance preparation. If we could move to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to get your product out there. And as you think about the effort to get into a broader market, people will say, why should I export? Well, again, it can help you increase your sales. It can certainly help you look at a long product life cycle. Some folks might have a stale inventory or a heavy inventory that they want to export. But we really start to look at ways in which you can expand your customer base, looking at that global opportunity to reach millions rather than a domestic market alone. And then also the revenue diversification. As a former banker, we used to look at some of our clients and determine, is their revenue stacked into one particular revenue stream? That reliance on a single domestic market can expose your business to potential risk, and exporting can help you overcome that risk if there is a domestic slowdown or there's other challenges in that market. And as I indicated earlier, this will certainly help you develop that profitability and growth, looking at increased job creation as compared to those other businesses that remain only in a domestic market. In many cases, it can be helpful to look at cost efficiency and productivity. Looking at that lower cost per unit of production and increased efficiencies in moving product into international markets increases your capacity, but can also reduce idle time for many of the folks in your organization. That competitive advantage in staying innovative clearly, and again, reducing that risk, as I indicated there. In some cases, the government support, as we will hear a little bit later in terms of how the government can support exporters in terms of SBA guarantees or different types of trade insurance to help boost that opportunity to export, but reduce your risk. And then again, the unlimited amount, I should say, of resources and talent and expertise, not just through the SBDCs, but a variety of other resources. A couple of conditions need to be in place. All that said, when we start thinking about we want to export, understand that your fulfillment capacity and your production adaptability needs to be there as well. Do you have the right team in place? Do you have the right working capital in place, and being able to make sure that you can fulfill those contracts? If we can move to the next slide, Joe.
Sure. And before we do, just, kind of on that question of why export, you kind of nailed it with, diversification, right? You're diversifying your business overseas. And, there's a lot of data on this. And I know, and Rich, you may have other data points too, but I know typically companies that are selling overseas, they tend to be a little bit bigger. They tend to grow faster. Again, you mentioned they hire more employees, but more importantly, they tend to pay higher salaries. So, and for me personally, they're more interesting places for people to work too. So that helps sometimes could help in getting, higher quality people to work for your company.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's why we want to look at that export readiness assessment. And if we could move to the next slide, one of the most important things, to Joe's point, is going to be, are you ready? That not just the company's readiness, but the product's readiness. And this particular assessment will look at your company's strengths and weaknesses. There's about 82 questions on this particular survey, and we use that to evaluate your firm. Do you have a clear understanding of your capabilities and resources, but your capacity and what actions you need to take to get there? And when we start looking at that assessment, I usually break it down into 3 different options. One is for new exporters. That includes a variety of areas to determine what level of readiness you might have. It provides an initial assessment of the export working needs and your capabilities, but we also provide additional basic support videos for you to go through to reinforce what we counsel and advise on. Now, that would be a new exporter. You think that you want to get into another country, there might be some low-hanging fruit. Someone has tapped on your shoulder because they found you online. Well, what do you need to do to get ready? That's great. But then there's the ones that you've already been found and you've been shipping products to maybe Canada or Mexico or the EU or some other country because they found you. Surprisingly, a lot of my clients come to me and say, I'm not exporting, I'm just sending product over to, the UK. Well, that's exporting. So those companies that have been what I call reactive exporters, Occasionally you'll get an order. But you're looking at that international sale, and that could mean that you have some low-hanging fruit. And that's where we really want to immerse in that survey to look at what you're doing really well and what the risks might be. And again, we might mean that you're in one or two markets, but you're kind of struggling. You don't know what to do in that scenario. And then from time to time, I will get experienced exporters that they've been very proactive. They've been exporting for a specific period of time, say a couple of years, and they have a pretty good understanding on the export mechanics, but they want to sell into a different kind of market, maybe one that is a little bit more challenging or smaller or higher growth potential than what they've currently been in. And we will actually help them take that deeper dive into the due diligence and see how we can help them stimulate that commitment and look at the key considerations when they're looking at getting into new markets. And how do we do that? Well, let's go to the next slide. I think that market and industry research are going to be critical tools no matter what. Often we'll get startup businesses that will come in and they don't have a business plan, they don't have a strategy in place, and they're asking really good questions. And so we try to turn to market and industry research to refute any kind of bias they might have or lack of knowledge. We like to keep our clients' feet rooted in the ground, in data and analytics, because we don't want you to enter a market or make decisions based on your opinion. So we look at that data and insights, we look at the analysis for opportunities, we assess those risks, and help you look at how you can expand in those markets. And some of those tools I've disclosed here, and then there's an additional slide, but let's focus on this one in the market and industry research. And when we start looking at the intelligence platforms to give you a quick snapshot, I would say that the US Census Global Market Finder, or even Google Market Finder, or TradeMap are three of the best. In Google Market Finder, you can plug in a variety of high-level information about your business, and it will actually navigate into those waters and help you find the most logical markets. You can narrow it down to the top three, but depending upon the product and or the service that you want to access, again, that quick snapshot. A few others that might help you to look at statistics or industry research on different markets, consumer attitudes or behaviors, their interests in different markets. Might be organizations like Statista or Global Web Index, also known as GWI, and even Mintel. So I think to give a good flavor of what kind of data that you want. Do you want to go to a trade show, or are you looking at markets where you might have interested buyers? That research will help you look at that data and more, including commodity codes and transportation modes. And that's really what we want to do, is root you in there. And I don't want to be remiss, but I want to remind everybody that there are two government trade resources that we rely on heavily, which is the U.S. Trade Administration and the country commercial guides. There's a variety of industry reports and market intelligence there, free. And it gives you a really good synopsis of those markets. And then again, our colleagues at the U.S. Department of Commerce, Tony and Jackie and Melissa, have been great partners of ours. They help us narrow down different trade agreements or market access requirements and even trade regulations. They're a great partner there. As we move to the next slide, I'm going to pause for a moment and see, are there any questions at this point, Joe?
No, I'm just going to go back to your, I know this might be a little premature, but your export readiness assessment. I know this has like over 80, questions associated with it, but there were a few here just in this slide that kind of reminded me of, there is a STEP grant program that the SBA helps fund. And in each state has an office that administers the STEP grant. And it can be used for things like, if you have to change your packaging, if you need translations on your new packaging, or you're doing some more export market research, or you're looking to do some website localization or internationalization. These are things that are available for STEP grant funding. So just more of a, I guess, shameless plug. SBA.gov/international is the website you could go to learn more about the STEP grant and specific what's available in your state. And I see that Tony just put a link to that in the chat. So I will leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's a
And
great point. And
yeah,
I do cover that a little bit more in the finance slides that we have, but let's pause there for a moment because the assessment does go into that in terms of not just the target market, but you said the labeling and the packaging,
yeah,
looking at different product features. And then again, who you've worked with up to this point. There are a variety of different organizations that can help you navigate tariffs or non-tariff barriers, but also that finance side, um, whether it's packaging or website translation, there's a variety of different aspects that that STEP grant can help with. And again, the U.S. Department of Commerce. But we really do that deep dive on that assessment to really look at what you're doing and what the business is not doing. And we help fill the gaps by doing that assessment. It's a really good dialogue. And because it's 82 or 83 questions doesn't mean that it's overbearing. It's really a conversation and designed to be that way.
yeah.
So Joe,
And
thanks for pausing on that. That's a really good point.
the one that kind of jumps out to me too is number 9. Talks about, really having top management support when looking to go international. And that is critical. And I
Yep.
know from, personal, professional background, like without that, it's going to be really difficult. So that's
Right.
that's key.
Right. And I can't say that enough. I mean, I moved forward in terms of the market research, but there's such a critical component of your team in an organization. If you're spending time doing the research, trying to figure out where that product can go, and you're part of a research arm of the business, and you're looking at sales and marketing, management needs to support that because it's not just about collecting the research and data. It's about the commitment in terms of the action plan. It takes time, energy, and money to really do a solid job in penetrating a new market, but being prepared to do so. Because you don't just show up at a trade show, you've got to do research. You've got to reach out and find out what the demand is in that market. So management needs to support that. You're going to be spending quite a bit of time. And that's why we recommend once we do these surveys is not just management support, but what staff is dedicated to that company to really look at not just research, but the sales, the marketing, and the follow-up. Making sure that once you get to a trade show or you're reaching out to clients, that that customer service part of it and the record keeping is on target as well. Good points.
Denise, is that document available to everyone publicly on your site or once they start working with you?
It is on the site. And it can also be found at the US trade.gov website as well. And I can later, once I'm finished talking and we do some other housekeeping at the end, I'll plug it into
Perfect.
the chat as well. It's a great tool, and I
Yeah.
can't emphasize enough, leverage the free tools that are out there. There's phenomenal ones.
Yeah, it's good mental exercise to go through even before engaging with you, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And as part of that mental exercise, I see Joe brought up the next slide and talking about market entry. And when we think about being proactive versus being reactive, sometimes we forget that getting a really good market strategy, looking at where we're going to be in months to come, how do you make the decision to go after a particular market? What do you do? Where do you go? Um, as I show on here, there's a couple of databases that will help you determine what market to choose. Are you going to make that decision to go into Canada because they're right next door? Or are you going to make that decision because you have a gut feeling? So when we start thinking about when we get into a market, um, are you going to be going in directly, selling direct to consumer or direct B2B? Are you going to be leveraging an indirect third-party intermediary in your home country through agents or distributors? And when we think about the non-equity or contractual entry, that will influence how you get into different markets. For example, are you going to be selling that product or service directly, as I indicated, or are you going to be licensing it or franchising it or developing some type of joint venture? But I always tease people when they say, I just got a gut feeling that it's going to be a really good idea to go into country ABC. Okay, well, what's your gut feeling about that? That's why we pull in that data and we start looking at who's buying it. Is there really a need there? And as I indicated, those data tools and other resources, I've put a couple of the leading ones up there that can help on that particular decision making. Um, those factors in terms of entering the industry, that target market and those resources, we've got to consider the risk tolerance. And that's really what we're looking at. The example that I tend to give is we're here in the United States and it's really easy in New England. Should I say easy, or it's more practical for some folks to take a truck over the Canadian border and move into Canada, or if we're in the southern part of the country, moving into Mexico. But geographic location can be also a hindrance. Um, the trucks can be delayed, flights can be delayed. But again, looking at that risk analysis, is there a trade agreement in place? And that's really why we want to look at those types of databases, thinking about that market entry and developing an action plan to get there. How much control would be there? Are there different types of directives or tariffs? Are there quotas? So we want to make sure that we consider that. And in light of that, if we move to the next slide, putting that export plan of development is going to be really important. We've already talked about you have an idea that you want to grow and expand and the analysis that needs to be done. Well, we also have to look at in your export plan of development how you forecast. There's key elements in that export plan, and that would be putting together your sales goals and strategies. Are they measurable? Up to this point, what has your business done? Do you have at least 2 to 3 years of measurable, achievable goals? And is that timeline and target realistic? That banker that's going to be coming to you, or you're going to be going to say, I need help getting this product. I need inventory. I need machinery and equipment. I need to hire someone. These are the things they're going to be looking at. Do you know that market? And have you achieved your goals and strategies up to this point? Do you understand the regulatory and the compliance factors that are going to be there, including the international laws? And equally important, have you protected your intellectual property? And so when we start looking at the idea and the analytics, that forecast is going to include an awful lot of those concepts to have that dialogue with that banker. Um, that risk management in getting that plan or that action plan developed is going to be really, really important. What are the supply chain trends? And are there key partners that can help you get that product from manufacturing or that service that you provide across and into the key decision makers on the other side? And then the implementation part of it, when we start thinking about, is the product adaptable to that market? Are there aspects of your product or service that are standardized within that culture? The different types of risk assessments that need to be done there in terms of culture and consumer demand or preferences. That's going to be really important to be able to analyze. And that's why we say put that plan of development together. Why is it so important? Again, it's going to provide you focus and direction, but it's also going to identify those challenges and your solutions. We know we have a problem potentially, but we have a solution to overcome that risk. It doesn't have to be your company. It can be a partner that helps you navigate that. When you secure that financing, it also demonstrates the business potential for other investors or lenders to be with you. Do you need trade credit insurance? Again, your bank can be a real partner with you as you move through this. So having a good discussion and a well-articulated plan can get you through that international business success.
There's a lot on this slide, Denise. So let's take a pause here for a moment. And I have a couple questions, and I see there's a question in the chat as well. But first, one thing I hear this from companies a lot, but how long does this plan have to be? How many pages do I need to write? Like, what's it look like?
The typical answer is it depends. It depends on how articulate you are in other parts of your business. I have seen really good export plans that are 5 to 7 pages. I've seen ones that are more robust, if you will, because it depends upon the complexity of what it is that you're doing, what market you're going into, and again, the other aspects of your business plan. So there's no magical number I see business plans and export plans nearly every day. I've seen some really good 5 to 7 page business plans because that's really what we needed to get through it. If your business
Okay.
has been in business less than 2 to 3 years and you don't have a really good set of financials at this point, you don't have historical experience, bankers are going to ask for a little bit more meat on the bones, as we say. So there's no
Yeah, no.
magical number, Joe. Good question.
No, I'm glad you said the 5 to 7 pages because again, you're a former banker. I was in banking for many years, and
Yeah.
bankers don't want to read a 50-page document either. So
No.
really, you want this thing to be really kind of crisp to the point and include the information that's necessary. Now, is it in your experience like a PowerPoint presentation format? Is that okay to do?
I'm finding that some bankers will come into a PowerPoint presentation and they love that because, again, it's crisp if you leverage the notes section. And yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Um, the narrative is really important if you're not going to be there in person discussing it and having a dialogue with that banker. So that's why I say the notes section and outlining what the detail is, the strategy and explaining yourself just a little bit. But yeah, I've seen PowerPoints, and that's why I would suggest come to the SBDC because we can help you hone that. We know what a banker is going to look for. And basically, being a former banker, I wanted to know 3 things. Can they pay? In other words, what's their cash flow? Will they pay? Which is their credit history. And what if
Yeah.
they don't? What's their collateral position? And so if you can explain that to a bank and make them feel very comfortable with your financials and an overview and summary in a pretty solid plan, here's my product and service. This is the problem in that market. Here's how I want to get it there, how people are going to find us, and then who our partners are. And I'm leaving a lot of things out there. But again, as I've said, explaining what your strategies are, your pricing and your consumer acquisition, the regulatory compliance, what you've put in place, that's a pretty solid plan. And again, it doesn't have to be 100 pages. It can be a good 5, 7, maybe 10 pages. And to me, that's pretty concise.
Yep, I agree. And like of this list here, is there like which areas do you see based on your experience do small businesses need the most help? Like where's your is there a main focus that you have, or is it just depend on the company and their own expertise?
Honestly, folks that I've worked with can generally get the research, they'll read through it. I find most people really need help with the financial analysis and the pricing strategies. We have tools in place, which I'll discuss a little bit later here today, that can help analyze and put that good pricing strategy and test it. Um, it's really the financials in
Yep.
most cases. And again, if they don't have access to the research, we can get that. The second most commonplace is the marketing strategy. And that's going to be making sure that they're being sensitive to everything else that needs to come into play, making sure that folks can find them. They have a solid sales, marketing, public relations strategy. Those are usually critical because there's cultural variations they need to take into consideration.
Yep. I'm going to get to a couple questions in the chat. And I think the first
Sure.
one kind of relates back to market entry. Um, what wisdom can you impart upon us in identifying a target market in light of current tariff climate? That might be a tough one to take here,
Yeah.
given the uncertainty and like the pause on tariffs, but curious if you have any insights
Yeah.
on that.
I do have a few, and I don't want to seem callous to this because I think tariffs are going to affect us for some time to come, but I don't want that to be a distraction. I think that a good pricing strategy, stay very focused on where you feel that your market is. Let's put the pragmatic strategy and plan together and take into consideration the tariffs are going to be either on incoming product on an import and or they're going to be on your outgoing product as an export. I don't want to seem again flippant, but it is going to be all in your pricing strategy and how you navigate where that product goes. We've got to think about that in terms of financial capacity, and looking at the regulatory and compliance side of that. Don't let the tariffs and the political climate influence all of your business decisions. They are a risk. They are there. But let's focus on the need and again, standardizing that product and getting it into that market where it needs to go. And I'm willing to open that up to, Rich or you, Joe, if you've had any other kinds of feedback. I'm finding that the tariffs are a real distraction for a lot of folks, but it's really strangling small businesses in many ways because they're just not prepared to deal with, incremental or exponential increases.
No, I agree with you, and I think it's, a little bit of wait and see
Yeah.
what's going to come. So
The last part of it too is I would say if there are alternative places for you to source product on terms of importing so that you have raw material at an affordable price, but also look at domestic sales and see how we can pivot for a time. It depends again on the product and the service. But Rich, I saw you unmuted and I wanted to get your feedback on that as well.
Yeah, just what we've been hearing is really more fear based on the uncertainty than, actual problems facing their business. It's just that anticipation of this moving target. So that's all I had on that. But I agree with everything you said. I mean, you just have to approach it with your pricing strategy and figure out, is this still a good market for you now, or do you have to wait for some change to entry?
Yeah,
right,
I'm finding that prices will go up and prices will go down. This is not an economics class. But again, I don't want to sound flippant. More to come. Um, let's look at pivoting. I know this webinar is on exporting and getting ready to export, but that's what the nature of our businesses are, is pivoting and being prepared. So good question.
Okay, before we have one more question from the chat before we jump into the marketing action plan. How do you navigate countries with limited market data?
Oh, very good. That's where we come into working with some of our partners. Great question. The U.S. Commercial Service or U.S. Department of Commerce is able to get feet on the ground, and we leverage them in remarkable ways. They leverage the International Chambers of Commerce and their representatives on the ground in other countries. And so we can pull some of that data and research from them. Sometimes there are countries that don't report an awful lot of data. Um, Good question. We leverage our partners to try to get in there.
Yep.
Just want to say that the data that we get is from a combination of the University of Connecticut's library, which is quite extensive, and the State of Connecticut State Library, which again is free. So I'm hard pressed sometimes to not find a lot of data. It takes some time to get it, but we can get it.
Great, thanks, Denise.
Sure. Sure. Let me get back into my presentation as well. There we go. I have so many windows open. Good morning again. So the marketing action plan, when we start thinking about this, it's not just about getting the market strategy on paper and the marketing mix and the promotion and all the things that you need to do. As we talked about it, getting the market research done, but also looking at the way that we analyze your competition. Who else is performing in those markets? So that competitive analysis comes in a number of ways, and I would encourage you to think about that. Just because you think that you've identified an opportunity, how do you differentiate yourself from the competition in those other countries? And again, those target markets have unique regulatory and legal environments. You want to make sure that you're working within them. And then it's not just about globalizing a website or globalizing your strategy, it's about localizing it. And what I mean by that is adapting your marketing materials and translating it for that local market to get your message and your visuals out there, your website content that's going to appeal to that local audience. And I'll use a domestic example, but if we go through New England, and many of us are here in New England, there's going to be a different cultural feel and vibe. But if you go down to the Midwest or you go to California, there's going to be a different feel. Those audiences are going to need different types of things. They're going to be looking for a different way to communicate. Keep that in mind, as well as the cultural differences in those sensitivities. Try to avoid being misunderstood. And that's why I say that Google Translate can help a little bit in a cursory, high level way, but it is not the best way to translate your website or your marketing material to get into a particular country. Those cultural variations could be based on colors, of your labeling, the visuals on those labels. It could be in the way that you verbalize or put in writing in their language. There's all kinds of examples out there from Purdue Chicken to others who have put out some real mistakes in the way they've translated and moved their products. I have a friend who works in India and they were trying to sell toothpaste and they could not sell the toothpaste because the way it was translated, the way that they penetrated that market. And also understand that McDonald's or Burger King, when they're in other countries, they adapt to that culture. You're not going to get a Whopper that's exactly the same or a Big Mac that's exactly the same as the way we make them in the United States. And they also add local flavors on their menu so that it draws people in. I had a colleague in my master's, my MBA, when I went through that at UConn, and he was from India. His parents owned a business there, and he said people actually dress up and go to McDonald's in the town that they were in at that time. I don't know if this still happens, so I have to plead a little bit of ignorance on this, but they actually dress up. Going to McDonald's was a really big event there. So keep that in mind, those cultural variations, and tailor the product that you're getting to fit those variations in that local market if necessary. And if you don't know how to do that, I would say embrace and be open-minded to building local partnerships with local influencers who understand that and can help you penetrate that market. And then working with local agencies. Just about every country or community will have someone that is in leadership. Just like in the United States, we have mayors or economic development folks or economic development departments. I'm certain that wherever you go in the world, you will find similar types of individuals that are there. And as again, I talk about the high value proposition and positioning your strategy to determine how that brand is received. Always looking at launching it and getting public opinion, but looking at that compelling messaging and measuring the KPIs. How are your key performance indicators performing? Getting that mindset tapped into surveys, getting consumer feedback if it's applicable. I'm talking about consumers. At the same time, I want to pivot. There might be some manufacturers here that are thinking about, well, that doesn't really apply to my product. Your customer should still be giving you feedback. And if they're not, don't be shy, ask about it. One thing that I learned from several of my clients in these past 5 or 6 years is that you need to take a trip to the country that's producing your product or buying your product, because there's nothing like feet on the ground and actual visual, audible feedback. Somehow you've got to be able to have that touch feel. And if you can't do that directly, having a key influencer or a local entity that's going to be able to get that for you to keep your KPIs there. Why? Because you want to make sure that you monitor and adapt. Are you hitting the market that you want? And will that be an effective way for you to be successful and remain successful in that market? I hope that makes sense. And before we go to the finance part, are there any other questions, Joe?
Nope. The only question in the chat is really related to other resources, which I think you cover later on. So I think we can move on.
Okay. So if we go to the bottom line tool, all of this really comes around financing. I want to say that this is one of those tools that makes people either really happy or really nauseous. It is a spreadsheet, and I say that lovingly and sarcastically at the same time. But preparing to get to the bank, preparing to understand what it is that you need to know and have a relationship with a financial institution is going to be really, really important. This is a tool that the SBDC has worked through, and we've honed it to identify needs, but also help you research financing options and prepare that documentation. Things like financial statements are going to be really important along with your business plan to get that financial application complete and move forward. And the really nice thing, I'm just giving you one page about the bottom line, is the first 5 or so pages, we plug in your data, and that data creates a pivot table and a spreadsheet that will actually generate your profit and loss, your balance sheet, and your income statement. And then it will also produce ratios. Banks love ratios. And we can also put in there projections, taking the data from a year or two, maybe 3, plugging it in to determine what are the trends in your business? How successful will you be? That's the information that a bank wants. Now, Some of you may be saying, I have Peachtree, I have Xero, I have QuickBooks, whatever your accounting system. Super. We don't need the bottom line. We can use your own documents to determine what you're going to be able to project, and we can analyze those to help you get prepared for the bank and have that conversation. So if we can move to the next slide. Financial projections and a business plan, we talk about that. There's a variety of other documentation I'm going to discuss shortly, but every single one of the organizations that you see on this slide are going to want to have that information. More often than not, whether you're in manufacturing, medical device development, some kind of service-oriented business, consumer product. The SBA and XM Bank have been a great partner for us in so many ways. And if we think about that in terms of getting ready to export, knowing what your capital position is going to be prime. If you have a food and beverage product, the USDA has also been instrumental. And export credit, I can't even say it, export credit insurance. It's Monday morning, folks. I haven't had enough tea yet. But I think when we start looking at how those aspects of getting your capital position shored up, whether you're going to be doing export trade finance, shipping things like raw materials or actually, production, whatever that might be, those types of costs through pre-export finance or even putting the finance for shipments together. These folks can also work with you in backing your bank for letters of credit or credit insurance, as I indicated. I want to be very clear that the SBA is not the lender. Your bank is the lender. The SBA provides a guarantee. And a lot of folks come to me all the time and say, I thought the SBA or the SBDC lent that. No, we're a professional service provider. The SBA guarantees the bank up to 90% of what your loan is going to be. And that provides a little bit of insurance to the bank so that if there's some kind of trouble in paying, the bank has that secure position. It enables them to loan you more money and do that with some degree of confidence. But I put this up here because I want you to understand your credit worthiness, your credit score, your Dun & Bradstreet, FICO numbers. Those are going to be really important. As we go through this process, we also look at how we can help you ramp up those numbers, and we do an assessment on your credit. But you need to know a little bit more about your export experience, and again, having a sound export plan, because they're all going to ask about this. Now, I do have two others on here, including factoring and equity investment. That's not for everybody, but there are what we call asset-based lending and factoring that can take place when we're looking at options to get product into other countries. And I didn't know if we wanted to pause before I go to the next slide. Was there a question,
Yeah.
Joe?
I would just say on export credit insurance, join us tomorrow for our webinar where we'll take a deeper dive, or Rich Foy, who's on the line, will take a deeper dive into export credit insurance, what it is, when to use it, how much it costs. It's one of these really important kind of simple trade finance tools that can really be meaningful for a small business. Rich, I'll let you comment if you want to say a few words on credit insurance.
No, nothing today. I mean, it is a
Okay.
valuable tool that can be used as a risk mitigation, also to help with your financing. But we're going to take a deeper dive into that tomorrow. So hopefully everyone will join us for that. If not, you can always reach out to me. We've provided contact information.
Excellent, thanks. And then on your equity piece, Denise, what comes to mind there, again, for a small business is, again, the skin in the game. So if you are looking for financing, it's always good. Banks always like to see that the small business has skin in the game and that they're contributing something, whether it be 10% or 15% or more. That's important to banks, and that's meaningful. If you're always looking for 100% financing, that's always going to be a more difficult road. But when you can show that you've got skin in the game, typically that will be well received.
I would agree. And sometimes the business owner may not have that equity. So bringing another partner to the table, if you will, or an equity investor in part, If that equity investor holds more than 20% equity, their credit and their signature, their guarantee would also be included. But a lot of times folks will develop a partnership either domestically or internationally to shore up what they don't have. And that might be where you have that partner that's international. And that's really where we want to make sure they understand that they have an integral role to play here. But yes, equity takes two parts there. Good point. So what do you do to prepare? I'm going to run through these, Joe, and there's 10 of them. And so I would
Okay.
suggest getting your profile in order as this goes through. And that profile is who are you? What do you do? That's your business plan, your financial strategy, and your marketing plan. Get all the copies of your financial documents together, including tax returns, your financial statements for the business and yourself, the owners rather, for at least 2 to 3 years. Banks will be asking for that information. And then putting a sources and uses together. What are you going to be using the money for? How much money do you need? And how long will you need to use it? That statement is going to be very clear and concise. Shop around for credit. Talk to various lenders and banks. Joe and I are really good resources. We are constantly working with lenders every step of the way, every day. So if you have questions, please make sure that you know what your credit is and your Dun& Bradstreet, your FICO scores, whichever you call it. We talked about the business plan and projections. I showed you a little bit of a tool called the bottom line. If you don't have your own accounting mechanism, we can help you put those together, no matter how small or how large your business is. We're accustomed to meeting you where you are and getting you through that. Getting your product and service ready to go to market. And if we think about that, is the branding, the packaging, the labeling, all of those things, is that ready? Is it adaptable? And can it be put into the market that will meet that cultural demand and consumer preference? And then building your professional resume. What is your experience? You may be new to business or new to international trade. At the same time, you may have been working in a business or an industry that brings a tremendous amount of professional experience together. And if you don't have that, who else on your team does? I know this is a lonely journey as an entrepreneur, but I have to suggest that you're not in this alone. Many companies have key or strategic partners inside that business, key players. Or again, you have a partnership somewhere else that's helping you move that forward. Build that resume. Make sure that the banker knows how you do what you do and who's responsible for it. And this is where we move into number 8, which is making sure you have enough cash flow to support the loan. That's not just looking at a cash flow statement. We can actually help you take that deeper dive into your line items in your accounting and your bookkeeping. No, we're not accountants or bookkeepers, but we can certainly look at those numbers and how you got to them. I worked with a client 2 years ago who had a wildly high number or a dollar amount, if you will, in terms of revenue, but the profit was always near negative. And it's okay if you're going to draw that out because depreciation and other things can be added back into the financial analysis. But we found that there were things there where they were running a lot of personal assets through the business, including meals or equipment. They might have needed a vacuum cleaner. They ran that through the company. Some companies do that. Some individuals do it. My job is to help you be very logical and practical and help you legitimize and get things back on track. And so we spent about a year restructuring their habits and making sure they had enough cash flow to support the new loans. And the banker that worked with us was really grateful because it was kind of out of balance. And then wait, if possible, if you're signing a lease on any kind of property or a purchase and sales agreement to buy a facility, wait. Make sure you have your capital in place before you do that because it's going to lower your blood pressure. It's going to stop a few gray hairs from growing. But keep in mind, make sure your capital is in place before you make those decisions. And then, although last, but certainly not least, make sure that all of your regulatory requirements are met. The example that I think of is I've had quite a few clients in this past 2 years, especially since we got COVID sustained with some of the vaccines out there, is they try to enter the EU and they don't remember or they don't think about GDPR, which is the privacy requirements and any other licenses or protecting their IP when you go into another country. You may have intellectual property here, a patent, a trademark, or a copyright, even a trade secret. Sometimes you need to make sure that you put those precautions in place when you get somewhere else. Or does that country require any other type of licensing? So getting prepared is going to be a really big part of the next slide, which is the documentation. I covered some of these things, like the business plan and sources and use, a debt schedule. If you currently have any kind of debt, machinery, equipment, furniture, fixtures, you have an SBA 7A or a 504 or any other type of export working capital line of credit, and the list goes on, put those in a debt schedule. And that would include things like who the loan is with, its original balance, its current balance, the interest rate, the maturity date, things of that nature. There's some other things that need to go on there, but that's going to be really important to determine your ratios. Is the bank going to be comfortable in loaning you this money? And some banks do ask for bank statements. So if you're of the habit of getting them in paper, that's fine, but I want to encourage you to get them electronically, because putting them and loading them into a secure e-file within the bank is going to be a lot easier than making photocopies of stacks and stacks of bank statements. Then clearly here I put on your personal tax returns. As I said earlier, anybody who owns 20% or more of your business should have their personal returns ready to go as well. If you lease your real estate, then that lease agreement. And again, I go through a number of other things there. The one thing that I want to talk about is the personal financial statement goes along with any application. But letters of good standing now, I want to say in the past decade, this has become increasingly popular and required by most institutions now. The Department of Labor, Department of Revenue, and the Secretary of the State, those letters of good standing can generally be secured by signing into your file at those institutions and requesting that letter of good standing. Want to make sure that you're paying what you need to pay. And then again, being up to date with all municipal, state, and federal obligations. In the past decade or so, maybe longer, the state of Connecticut has done a number of different loans or grants. If those loans are up to date and any kind of federal obligation, including EIDL or PPP, want to make sure that those are up to date and obligations are fulfilled there. Now, I want to pause before we go to the next slide because I've put a lot of things in here and we're almost finished. But I wanted to say that pulling it all together in the next slide is going to be really important. This particular document, the Export Business Planner, I can certainly put that in the chat if we have enough time, is one place that everything that I've said today in, I want to say nearly 100 pages of that export planner has been condensed down. Some states still offer this planner. It is a fabulous tool in terms of pulling it all together, what you're going to need to get ready to export. That
Yeah,
can be found
that,
at STCD, sbtdc.org, and I will put that in the chat. I think this is a good spot for everybody to ask questions, so I'll pause.
No, great. Thanks, Denise. And I think that answers, Terrence had a question on, other resources to look at different types of business plans. And I think the Export Business Planner is a good place to start. And then again, just Googling Export Business Plan, you'll see different templates and, all but a little bit different, but covering most of the same, type of material.
And the last page here is just finding me. I think that I definitely want to make sure that you know how to connect with me. You can find us on just about all major social media, from Facebook to Twitter to LinkedIn, Instagram. The QR code is there for your preference, or you can reach us at ctsbdc@uconn.edu. I know this was a really quick overview. Make myself available. There are specific situations that vary from what we've presented today. I want to make sure that we talk about this in terms of all industries and in terms of product and service. So we touch all industries. I'm happy to answer any other questions, Joe, if there are any out there.
I don't see any more in the chat. We've got about 2 minutes until the top of the hour. So if anyone has any questions, pop it into the chat. Otherwise, we can wrap it up.
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing that you did bring up on your 10-point slide a bit, which was the bank. Shopping for credit, I think, is so important for businesses to establish a relationship and really get an understanding of what the bank's capabilities and their desires are, and make sure that there's an alignment between your company and theirs. We often see where there's a bank misalignment, where a small business banking with a large bank that ultimately will not really be able to handle their needs. There's not a willingness. So going through and just understanding, are they banking similar sized companies? Are they able to assist them with their lending needs? It's very important in developing a banking relationship.
Yeah,
I agree. Couldn't say that any better. Thank you, Rich. I also see in the chat that Tony, thank you very much for putting in there the trade.gov export assessment. So please all check the chat. Tony put that in there at the very beginning, and I think that that's a wonderful resource for you.
And let's see, it looks like we have one more question here. What can you advise regarding American-made products going into Asian market where there is a premium in the cost of goods? If you have any comment on that.
Are you asking me, Joe?
Yes. That just came from the chat.
Yeah, it depends on the product. Those products, again, could be in high demand if there is, again, all Asian markets are not the same as one another. Each market is a little bit different. Depending upon the product, those consumers may still buy it because, again, still many things made in the United States have a very, very high value, and they're in very high demand in many countries. Again, considering that, work that through in your pricing model. I don't know, Rich and Joe, if you have any feedback in any other way on that.
Yeah, you just have to keep doing the market analysis, see if it's still a viable product, given the increased expense. I mean, it really comes down to, the basics. You have an additional cost element, and if there's still a market, then move forward. Otherwise, rethink it.
I have a client, for example, who makes gluten-free, dairy-free hot chocolate mix, and it is a very, pun intended, hot item globally right now, and she's starting to penetrate new markets. And considering that it has doubled in price, it's still being purchased.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there are areas within the tariffs. I mean, not to get into the weeds, but make sure that your product that is classified properly. When you're looking at it, it might be able to be classified as something that has a lesser tariff, and still being truthful. Obviously, you have to have valid information out there, but I've seen over and over where people are paying higher duty and even tariffs because there's a misclassification. So obviously look at that and go through the whole due diligence of your product.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I think we should wrap it up. We're 2 minutes after the hour. Denise, thank you so much for your time today and for your expertise. Rich, you as well. And for Tony and Brian, thank you for monitoring and responding in the chat. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me. And again, I echo your compliments there, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you, Brian.
again.
I don't know if you need to wrap it up.
Thank you again for all the speakers. Invaluable session. Everyone please do tune in to tomorrow's session on credit insurance and payments and other terms by Rich Foy and also with Joe. Thank you. This does conclude today's session. We did throw a bunch of links in there into the chat, so please review those as well. A lot of information packed into this week and all of World Trade Month. Thank you again for attending. Please sign off.
Thank you. Have a good week.